Welcome back. A preliminary report into the collapse of 3 dams on the farm in Riverlands near Malmesbury on the Cape West Coast has been released by Minister of Water and Sanitation, Pemmy Majodina. Majodina tasked engineers with investigating the disaster after flooding caused major damage to property and infrastructure, displacing hundreds of residents. Joining us to discuss this further is Malmesbury. She is Swartland Municipality spokesperson. Good evening, Ms. Hasbrook. What has the preliminary report revealed?
Good evening. What's important for the municipality is that the preliminary report confirmed that the dams is on national government property and outside of the jurisdiction of the city of Cape Town. And that was a major issue for us, so that to have that confirmed to the public that these dams are not part of Swartland Municipality or the responsibility of Swartland Municipality.
So what we established is that it's part of the rural development's property, am I correct?
Yes, rural development and land reform.
And then beyond this, we understand that there were questions around the permits. Permits for those particular dams could not be located. Just talk us through this.
Yes, as the Minister stated in a report, it seems that all of these dams don't fulfill the necessary legal requirements. The report says that these dams aren't registered with the Department of Water and Sanitation as is needed and required by law. So there's no record of these dams.
So our understanding, from at least what we heard from our reporter who was following or monitoring proceedings today as the report was being released, is that this particular land was purchased by Rural Development in 2019. So meaning the previous owner would have been the person who constructed these dams, but we also understand that there were insufficient spillways, that any time when you have an overflow of the dam, you wouldn't see what happened then.
Yes, like the preliminary report stated that these dams weren't built to standard. And that's information that, and the dam specialists can speak more to that, but the spillways were insufficient. These were very old dams. Some of these dams dated back to 1960. And because these dams weren't registered with the Department of Water and Sanitation, all the due diligence could not be done in terms of these dams were inspected and monitored and maintained.
Perhaps enlighten us as the municipality. What would be the process when purchasing a farm with dams? I mean, would there not be any permits that are presented when you're purchasing the farms as the department?
That's not something that we can speak to because these dams don't fall even within our jurisdiction. The minister pointed out that due diligence must be done by the purchaser as well as the seller, and that is something that the department will have to give guidance on in future as we move forward as to where exactly, if there were any negligence, if there were any non-compliance. That is something that the department will have to give comment on as we move forward.
Malmesbury, I honestly appreciate your position in this, that now that you found out that it doesn't fall within your jurisdiction, it would be difficult to really speak to the detailed part of this specific property. But I'm asking just generally, would it not be the case that there would be that form of due diligence, that in such an instance you would then be presented when you're purchasing a land, a property or a farm of this nature, that if there are dams, you would have been provided the permits for those dams, or at least told when these dams were actually constructed? So would that not be the process that one follows when purchasing a farm with dams?
One would expect that to be the process. It's the same with when you're purchasing a house.
Yes.
But it's not always the case that everything is disclosed. There's always a period where the seller or the buyer has time to go back and on their offer and do due diligence or do additional investigation. But there's a responsibility with the buyer as well as the seller in this regard. It's not just one party that has to take responsibility.
But if we look at the purchase date, this was in 2019, when 2024, one would have assumed that the purchaser, at the very least, being government, would make sure that they have all the documentation, because if we look at it on the face of it now, this could have been averted. that if they sought those permits when purchasing the farm, or even before finalizing the purchase, if they sought those permits, they would have known that there's something problematic about those dams, and you wouldn't have had so many people displaced. At least that's what we're seeing with just the preliminary report.
Yes, one would expect. I mean, legal liability would expect everybody to do their due diligence. And as a responsible landowner, that is what you're supposed to be doing. But it's difficult for us because this property doesn't fall within our jurisdiction to say what did happen and what did not happen. And that is something that they will need to investigate. The general rule of law expects every party in every transaction to do their due diligence.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose for us, or for many people that would just have property, as you say, if anything, you would get your electricity certificate. So it was just something that was of concern that here they wouldn't have received those permits. But Malmesbury, thank you very much for joining us this evening and just shedding a bit of light on this very worrying story. That's Malmesbury Hasbrook, Swartland Municipality spokesperson, talking us through that preliminary report into the collapse of the 3 dams on Riverlands.